On today's Locked On Thunder podcast, can the rookies crack the Thunder rotation? How good is that 2025 draft class? And will the Thunder win the West?
You are Locked On Thunder, your daily Oklahoma City Thunder podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it going on the Locked On Thunder podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network, your teams every day. I am your host, media member, and Inside the Thunder beat writer Rylan Styles. Follow me on Twitter at Rylan_Styles. Follow the show on Twitter at LO ThunderPod. Today, we're joined by Richard Stayman at Mavs Draft on Twitter to discuss the 2024 draft class for the Thunder. What did they pull off in the draft? Can those rookies compete? And are the Thunder the clear favorites out west? Plus some 2025 NBA draft talk, all brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. Make every moment more right now at FanDuel.com. Go there right now as every customer gets boosts and bonuses daily. Go there right now to FanDuel.com. Richard, how are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. How about those Thunder, man? It's good to be back.
How about those Thunder? It's great to be back, even though we've never been more further apart than we are right now. We're no longer just down the highway, but luckily you're still able to hop on via the beautiful thing of the internet. But we have not gotten to talk to you since the draft, and the Thunder starting at 12, which we thought at the time of our last pod was their lone pick. They then traded in for 2 more picks, but at 12 they get Nikola Topic, who's out this entire season with an ACL injury. What did you make of the Thunder pulling the trigger on that, and what does Topic bring to the table?
Yeah, I like that pick. I'm not huge on Topic. I think with him, there's some issues for me about the athleticism and functional athleticism, right? He doesn't really dunk. He's not going to blow by you. He also, his jump shot's a little bit far away, and then also, of course, the injuries. But the jump shot, it seems pretty projectable. Had 88% from the free throw line. That's extremely promising. It's really strong touch, but he hits a flat shot. It can be line drive, so needs to really improve that. I think it's just consistency. He can finish with both hands at the rim. He gets really, really involved, I think, with he's the best below the rim finisher from this last draft. He also needs to get stronger, and then, of course, his body, 6'6" with a 6'5.5" wingspan, not ideal. But I like the pick because if you are an NBA team that is picking where the Thunder are, you don't get lottery picks when you're a team that's expecting to compete for the finals next year and that you just made the second round this last year. That is not easy. With Topic, I think since he's out this year, I think it's very easy to retain that same value number 12 had. And at that point, that's all you want. You want to retain those assets, make sure that you're not losing value. It's like a new car, right? A draft pick. It's like a new car. It's really cool when it's on the lot, and it has more value when it's not been assigned to anybody. But the second it gets assigned to somebody and there's a name to it, all that, it immediately loses value. So I think it's a good pick for somebody who's not going to play this year. There's really no chance for him to tank his stock. They can move him again if needed.
What do you think that his value could look like should they go that route, next offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think he could be a really nice sweetener for a trade. I personally am not sure he's going to be somebody who sticks in the rotation for Oklahoma City anytime soon, given their roster and their expectations. But I do think he is someone who could easily be able to just hold that trade value. And you say, hey, we'll give you however many picks, whatever. Say it's for a big name, right? So like just random player like Karl Anthony Towns or something. He's not going anywhere. But someone like that, or Ingram, right? Let's just go with Ingram, where we'll give you some picks or something, or we'll give you whatever it is. We'll put in Topic in there, and that makes everything much easier.
So you mentioned about sticking in the rotation. Let's just turn the injuries off for a second and act like he's ready to go. Talent-wise and what you saw on film, would he even be NBA ready enough to run a secondary unit? What do you think his role could shape up to be once he does get to that health?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's good enough to run an offense. His pick and roll game is just so smooth, and I think that's one of the most important things. At the worst, I think he could be a good 1B to an offense, if that makes sense.
So whenever you look at this draft, we thought that the Thunder were going to be done at 12. but they were not. They traded 5 second-round picks to get back in the first round, and they drafted Dillon Jones, someone who they targeted last year in the second round, who wanted to go back to school and become a first rounder. The Thunder made him a first rounder in this draft. How shocking was it to you to see Dillon Jones go in the first round?
Yeah, a little bit shocking. I mean, his advanced stats were pretty incredible, and I think in a draft like this, you have to kind of value that a little bit more. And he's somebody who did everything at Weber State. I mean, he's the only player I found in Bart Torvik's database that registered 30 rebound percentage, defensive rebounding percentage, and 30 assists in the same season. It's one of one. So, I mean, he really was one of the most productive players. Now, he's not that athletic, and the shot's a little bit far away, but the free throw percentage, same thing, is going to probably prevail and say, hey, he can actually shoot. And if that's the case, you have so many different avenues for him to become a realistic role player that can come in and play 15 minutes a game.
When you look at how good this team is and how, the style of play at which they play, where they're playing really fast, almost positionless, very versatile, how does Dillon Jones fit with this specific group and a team that is trying to, win big this season and will try to win big for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I don't know what his immediate value is. I've been struggling with that. I think he's probably at this point, is he going to be in the rotation? Like, I just feel like Oklahoma City is just so stacked. How does he get in there? And I think injuries, but who knows how deep they're going to run this year. I feel like that's going to be tough. He'll be in and out, I think, of the rotation. And it's not a bad thing. It's just,
Right.
Function of the class.
And then in the second round, they went after Ajay Mitchell, who I think is a really talented player, an electrifying scorer. I actually wrote about him for Draft Digest on SI before the draft, saying that he could be a second-round steal. He ends up with the Thunder on a two-way contract, which is really good value. The Thunder, of course, have like 9 guys right now that you think are going to play every single night. And then you got to sort through the Dillon Jones and Ajay Mitchell and Ousmane Dieng and like those kind of guys for 10, 11, 12, deep, which we know the Thunder are comfortable going 10, 11, 12 deep. When you look at Ajay Mitchell, is he someone who you feel confident in? Because you and I both called the whole, Wiggins scenario where we're talking how valuable he could be. That paid out for our prediction. What do you make of Ajay Mitchell as a two-way guard?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I still don't know what to make of the defense right away, but the offense I'm sold on. Like, he's a guy who at UCSB, he wasn't super healthy this year, and I think that made him look worse than he actually was. And yeah, the team didn't perform, but I think that goes hand in hand with that injury, right? So for Mitchell, I think with him, he runs such a perfect pick and roll, and he can score at all 3 levels. Like, he can play make. He's an ideal just backup guard for the next few years. Maybe he can emerge as a starter, but I think at a minimum, he's a rotation guard. I don't know how soon, but like, again, once he gets like in his groove, that's his floor.
So whenever you look at Ajay Mitchell, I think that in Summer League, I know you can't take much away from it. I think that what's been impressive was like even at the step up, because I think that like Summer League is a step up for Ajay Mitchell, because at least now you're playing with a team and against teams that have NBA caliber, NBA guys on the doorstep of the league at every spot on the floor. Whereas like at the mid-major level, you're not seeing that enough. Where you see him in Summer League, I think that what was really impressive was his ability to get to the paint, touch the paint every single time with the ball, and then kick out from there. And you can easily see that translating to the Thunder style. Should those, injuries pop up, and you mentioned that earlier, last year the Thunder had extreme injury luck. And it doesn't have to be anything devastating this season, but like it could be a twisted ankle. It could be, out for 2 weeks here or there. How pro ready is Mitchell? And then also we can go back to how pro ready is Dillon Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are very high floor players. I think both, again, like if Mitchell got the chance, now who knows how much of a positive he'd be, but I feel like with Oklahoma City's roster, he probably would be. The same thing for Dillon Jones. Now, Dillon, I would be less comfortable playing in 20-plus minutes than Ajay, just because Ajay's role is so clearly defined, and Dillon feels like a wild card every night for better or worse. And I think Jones, though, has 1 year trial run because he's making the jump from Weber State. I think he's better suited as a 2 to 3 year guy in terms of finding the rotation.
Well, let's talk about this 2025 NBA draft class, because the drafts never slow down in Oklahoma City, even as they are projected to be the top of the West. How good is it? What should you expect in that class? Plus, we'll talk about the top of the West. Do the Mavs make enough moves to still be the top of the West, or the Thunder at that crown again? But first, I want to tell you right now about our good friends over at FanDuel. Check out FanDuel.com right now. FanDuel is awesome. It's where you want to go because we all love sports, and we love sports so much we never want them to stop. But we know that with the playoffs winding down, we have fewer and fewer games, and the sports just aren't sporting like we want them to. But FanDuel lets you keep going and betting on sports whenever you want. You can open up their app and dream up the bet anytime that you're in the mood. So all summer long, FanDuel is giving all customers with a bonus or boost all summer long, daily. That's right, daily, all summer long. There's something for you to do every single day, all summer long at FanDuel.com, including tonight's home run derby, which will be a lot of fun as Pete Alonso is the favorite to win the home run derby in Texas. Bobby Witt Jr., the hometown kid, is at plus 470. If maybe you only like the NBA, you can check out the NBA as the Summer League action continues tonight with OKC taking on Miami. The Thunder are plus 7.5, and the Thunder are also the second best title odds on FanDuel. So you can bet on all that over there at FanDuel.com/lockdown. We're back on the Lockdown Thunder podcast, on the Lockdown Podcast Network, your teams every day. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. You can find him at Mavs Draft on Twitter. You can find him on the Lockdown NBA Big Board podcast, which you can go find on our podcast network. When you look ahead to the 2025 class, what's the early perception? Because like the 24 class, from start to finish, it was perceived as a bad draft class. What's the early perception on 2025?
Yeah, it's a good class. It is a really good class. You got a bunch of, I would say the top 5 is probably all U.S. born players. And then after that, the international guys are pretty strong. Technically, VJ Edgecombe is a U.S. guy, but he played internationally. I want to say with the Bahamas. I can't remember which country, but he played internationally. Then you got guys like Hugo Gonzalez. You have, I'm drawing a blank on how to say his name, but Noah Senge, I think is how you say it. Rocco Zakarski, Nolan Traore. You have a bunch of these guys. The international class is really strong. The freshman class is really strong. And there are some good returners, I think, that'll fill out the end of the first half of the first round. So 20 to 30. It's a really good class. There's so much upside. Just looking at it, I think even the top, I was just so low on this last draft class. I would say the top 6 on my board all would have gone number 1. So for whatever that's worth.
That is worth a lot. And I think that, like, for you, like, you've been studying high school and all the pre-college, circuits. Like, you've been putting in the work to be prepared to answer this question, like more than anyone. So whenever we're talking about the 25 class, how good is Cooper Flagg? Like, just if you were to dream of like that Clipper swap and it somehow leaps to number 1, how good is Cooper Flagg?
Yeah, and just to elaborate, so what more on what Ryland said. So I went to EYBL last year, saw a bunch of the 17Us. I've been watching a bunch of tape on it for the last couple of years since they were in the 16s. And then this last year I went to City of Palms, which is a yearly annual event. It's been going on for 50 years where all the top high school players and their teams, I'd say probably 25 to 30 of the top 50 overall are playing, like in all of high school, are playing in that tournament. So it's like Montverde, Lutheran High. So that's where VJ Edgecombe was. Montverde had Cooper Flagg. So all those teams. So I've seen a lot of these guys, like Ryland said, just to kind of further that. But with Cooper Flagg, yeah, he's incredible. In Dallas, I was actually unable to attend the game, but my guy Rafael Barlow saw and posted about it. He dropped 50 points. I think he had almost a triple-double too. I know he had a double-double, but yeah, Cooper Flagg's ridiculous. The defense is, in terms of just all-around defensive ability, I think he's one of the better defenders I'll scout in my time doing this. He's 6'9", truly 1 through 5. Reminds me of Andre Karolinko on that end. And that's the comp he's going to get because we're lazy and comps and like white guy to white guy, 6'9", does a lot of different things. but I think his upside's much higher. Like his shooting and creation off the dribble, it may not be that great, but I think it's something where he's good enough at everything else that it'll eventually come around. And like the work ethic's there, the intangibles are there. So I really like him. I think he's gonna. I'm still not sold he's my number one because there's so much talent around him in this class, but he should be at the moment consensus number one.
Yeah, and I think that what you alluded to there is right. I think that like at the moment, I could see him being, of course, number one for right now. I also think that he'll be number one the entire cycle. Like I think that it'll be the Cooper Flag draft, but that's not to besmirch anyone else in this class. So who do you think, as tough as it will be to purse through, who do you think is like the Jalen Green, Cade Cunningham? Like if it wasn't for Cade Cunningham, if it wasn't for Victor Wembanyama, then it would have been who?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Ace Bailey's that next one. Him and his teammate Dillon Harper, who is Ron Harper's son. And if you're an absolute sicko, Ron Harper Jr.'s brother, then yeah, Dillon Harper's that other guy. He's added a lot of strength. He's a 3-level scorer, plays defense, facilitates, combo guard at 6'5", has a lot of those boxes checked. Ace Bailey's upside is just that much higher. I think he's that like Jalen Green type almost, where but much more controlled, and I think actually a better archetype. 6'9" forward, outstanding defender, was the only player on his team really in a way, like he was a one-man show. So some of the stuff people knock him for motor and things like this is just not the case. Like when he's down 20 in the final minutes of the fourth quarter, yeah, his motor kind of disappears. Most players fall under that, but Ace Bailey just comes off of screens. I think he's the best. He's like the ideal wing. If you were to draw up a wing in a lab, 6'9", athletic, long, and just does everything you want from a wing, I think that's him. And he's the biggest threat to me for Cooper Flag's number one title.
So the Thunder have picks flying in, picks flying out. There's swaps. What to you is this draft shaping up as in terms of like tiers? Like, is there a significant drop off in the top 15 and then another drop off at pick 25 and another drop off? Like, where are the drop offs so far?
Yeah, I think after like the 7th player on my board, there's a decent drop, but it's not like that big. It's still guys who are comfortable lottery picks. They're guards, so I'm not even going to bother with this because Oklahoma City's not going to take another guard. But I think really once you hit like on mine, once I hit 25, I'm like, okay, now it's starting to be a little bit of a crapshoot. But there's so many guys where I'm like, these are upside plays past my 25, where it's better upside plays than we just saw this last year. The upside plays this year were, I don't know, guys that can maybe start. This year's, it's like, hey, there's a real chance that this player becomes an all-star in 4 years from the 20s plus. Like, and it's easy to kind of spot this year compared to this last year.
So top to bottom, this class is just exceptionally, a lot better.
Yeah, it's loaded. It's not 2023, but it is noticeably better than 2024.
And then there's some rumorings that like 2026 can be even better. And again, you're plugged into the high school circuits. What do you think of that take?
Yeah, it's always easier to dream about the further away ones because the closer you get to draft time, more guys are finished products. So like these kids who are about to be rising seniors, yeah, it's easier to say like, oh, these guys are going to be better. I don't think so. The top is better. I think that I'm pretty certain about. Ajay Debonsa, Cam Boozer, I think those two are just head and shoulders above everybody else. They're 6'8", 6'9" forwards. I mean, Cam may even be taller than that, but they do everything. Darren Peterson's incredible. He's a wing who is, if you were to draw up like the most perfect shooting guard, I would say he's not like a true, or he's a wing, but like let's just call him a shooting guard with athleticism. You were to draw up what that looks like, it's Darren Peterson. And then you have Koa Pete, whose brother plays for, I think, the Saints. I know he played for the Saints last year. Really powerful athlete, smart player. And Jalen Harrelson's there. That class is very good. I think that's maybe a little bit, if it had anything, maybe a little bit more depth, I would say. But I think the 1 through 10 overall is better in 2025 with 1 through 4 in 2026 being better.
So whenever you look at this draft, I think it's going to be a lot of fun to cover this 2025 cycle the entire way through. You've already gotten started way back last year even. And of course, now that the 24 class is over, you're just head deep into it. When you look at it for the Thunder, let's say, of course, that they want to address, table setting, playmaking, and size. How many options are there for them, just roughly?
For table setting, playmaking, and size, you said?
Yeah.
It's Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson's probably your best bet at the top. I'm sorry, there's too many picks going around. Who does Oklahoma City have? I know they have Houston in some way. I think that's one of their swaps. And
there's a way that they can get Houston, Miami, Philadelphia, and then they can swap with Clippers. It's all just a jumbled mess. They could be picking literally anywhere.
So this is a swap year for the Clippers. That's the big one. Yeah, Trey Johnson. Trey Johnson's your dude. He was assigned to be a wing everywhere he came into in high school, like at Link Academy. Every single time he was at a different place, whether it's EYBL, schools, he had to run point guard. That's your guy. I think Trey Johnson is really good. He's also a Dallas kid. I'm big on him.
So whenever you look at this draft, is there anyone who just, regardless of position, regardless of like Thunder team needs, is there any just one that you think Thunder fans, the archetype they've been conditioned to look after, they'll really love watching this guy play?
I need to think about that. That one's tough. A Thunder kind of guy, Drake Powell, maybe. He's a really good defender. One of the toughest in the class. Can settle for jumpers a little bit too much, but the jump shot is really good. I think if he can just become a finisher, I think that's that kind of guy.
Well, you can be watching a lot of North Carolina basketball this season coming up. We'll be watching NBA basketball too. The Thunder and the Mavericks battling it out. Who's the favorite out west? We'll decide it all coming up. But first, we're here talking with Richard Stayman at Mavs Draft on Twitter, Locked On NBA Big Board, soon to be another location that we won't talk about right now. Richard, what a time. What a time. Both teams, the Mavericks and the Thunder, jostling for Western Conference positioning for supremacy out west. I think that the Western Conference is going to be an absolute bloodbath. It's going to be separated by just a finite amount of games as it was last season. For you, if you had to pick your top 5 in the West right now, who would it be?
I mean, Oklahoma City, Minnesota, Dallas. I don't know if Denver's going to get there. Like they just don't have enough depth. I think they'll be 5 or 6. I'm really down on that team right now. Their entire premise is they have to get in, like all of their young players have to click right away. Julian Strawther, Peyton Watson, Christian Brown, and others. I don't know how much I'm gambling on that. So I would say Oklahoma City, Dallas, Minnesota. Man, this is tough. You put me on in a tough question. I'll go Memphis in there.
I love Memphis.
Is this the year New Orleans does it? Is this the year if Zion is healthy, I think they're a top 5 team.
Yeah.
Depending on the Ingram stuff, though. They have too many dominoes. I actually don't like that answer. So I'm going to ignore that for a minute. And, I'll just put Denver there at 5.
Yeah, that I settled in at the top 5 of Oklahoma City, Dallas, Denver, Minnesota, Memphis. That's kind of where I'm at with it. I love Memphis. I think that this team's going to be really good and really fun to watch. I think that was like the only Zach Edey spot where he could have been impactful. I'm not a Zach Edey guy, but around Desmond Bane, your guy, and around Jaren Jackson Jr., like I'm into it now a lot more, especially for a team who's like, used to playing with a bigger big. Did the Mavericks moves? I think at worst, the Mavericks went laterally. At best, the Mavericks improved with their offseason because I think that, you've got to look at Najee Marshall and try to project and like grade him on a Luka Doncic curve of like how much better he can make players. Where are you at on what Dallas did this offseason?
Yeah, I wish they could have brought Derrick Jones back. I still prefer him over Najee Marshall. A lot of Mavs fans have this infatuation with Najee now. I scouted him a ton at Xavier. I've seen him a lot in the NBA. I think he's good. He does a lot of different things, and he's a good defender, but he's not Derrick Jones. Like, I think the idea of him is a little bit better than the actual version of him. again, like you said, you have to grade him on a Luka scale. He's going to be better offensively, but not as good defensively. Like Derrick Jones should have been an all defense, in my opinion, or at least I don't even know if he got any votes, like mini votes, if anything. He should have gotten so many more votes, and I think they're going to really miss his defensive presence. He can guard 1 through 4. We'll see about Najee doing that effectively. I know he can, but I don't know how great. So I'm excited to see that, but that was my big thing. That was my big concern. We'll see how they add throughout the rest of the offseason, because also Derrick Jones was added in like late August last year. So, they could do that exact same thing again this year. But the offense, I don't know how you stop that offense. Like that offense is going to be ridiculous. They had a great offense already, and they're adding more weapons. Like Klay Thompson may be a little bit washed, but I mean, come on, next to Luka, like that's not gonna. He's not gonna be worse.
So with the Thunder making the moves of Caruso and Hartenstein, and you watching that series up close and personal as we did the Thunder get better? And did the Thunder, not only get better, but did they get good enough to knock off the Mavs and thus give themselves a title shot?
Yes, easily. So one of the things I've always been a proponent of is like, it's not just talent, right? Like experience. I think experience matters. I think that's a kind of, I think people try and wash that away, especially when they're a fan of a young team. But for me, I think with the Thunder, they got bullied. Like they got pushed to the wall and they couldn't get their backs off the wall, right? Like that whole test of the Mavs have been there multiple times where their backs were against the wall and they couldn't pull it off. And I think that's what helped them propel this year. They had guys like Kyrie, they had guys like Luka, they had other players that have been there before and knew how to win in that situation. And that stuff matters a lot. Now that Oklahoma City has been pushed around, and also they're still ahead of their timeline. Like at the end of the day, this rebuild is done in less than 3 years. That's insane. So they should be, in my opinion, they should be the favorite out of the West. They're that good. They have the defense, I think, is going to be really good as natural progression improves too. I mean, guys like Chet, he's going to be in his second year. Like that, I'm not worried about them at all. The defense is there. They have the experience now. They know how to, fight back a little bit harder when their backs are against the wall, which every young team has to learn. So I'm about it. I think they're probably my favorites to win the West.
Yeah, I think that they're the favorites out West as well. We agree with Vegas there as well. But Richard, thank you so much for joining us. Let them know where they can find all your stuff and kind of follow along with this 2025 draft cycle.
Yeah, everything Locked On NBA Big Board, Mavs Draft on Twitter, and then mavsdraft.substack.com. I post a lot out there. So really appreciate you having me, Rylan.
I really appreciate you coming on. Always enjoy whenever you can make the time for us. You're welcome back with an open invitation anytime. We'll talk again as the 25 draft cycle continues to heat up. But again, thanks, Richard. And until next time, be good and be good to one another.